A deep-sea engineer discovers a research station where the crew has been integrated with alien organisms that transform humans into ocean-dwelling beings, forcing her to choose between joining this evolution or destroying it to preserve humanity's surface existence. The first thing Miranda Thorne noticed about the abyssal station wasn't the crushing darkness that surrounded it like a living thing, or the way the metal groaned under 11,000 feet of Pacific Ocean pressing down from above. It was the silence. The kind of silence that made you hold your breath without realizing it, made you question whether your heart was still beating or if the pressure had finally stopped it cold. She pressed her palm against the porthole of the transport, submersible, watching the station's lights grow larger through the black water. 27 years of deep-sea engineering had taught her to read the ocean's moods, but this felt different, wrong. The station hung in the water like a broken spider. Its connecting tunnels stretched between habitat modules that pulsed with an eerie bioluminescent glow she'd never seen in the technical specifications. The blueprints she'd studied during the 18-hour descent had shown a standard deep-sea research facility, all clean lines and mechanical precision. But the reality before her was organic, alive in ways that made her stomach turn. The connecting tunnels undulated like arteries, and the habitat modules themselves seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting with a rhythm that felt disturbingly familiar. First time down to the hive? Asked Captain Reese from the pilot's seat, his weathered hands steady on the controls despite the tremor in his voice. He'd been running supplies to Abyssal Station for 3 years, but Miranda caught the way his eyes kept darting to the sonar display, the way his jaw clenched whenever the hull creaked. Yeah, Miranda checked her dive computer for the 100th time. The pressure gauge read numbers that still made her stomach turn. Outside the hull, the ocean pressed against them with the weight of a mountain, held back only by inches of titanium and ceramics. You call it the hive. That's what the crew calls it. Started about 6 months ago. Reese's laugh held no humor. You'll see why. Place used to be all business, all science. Now it's... He paused, searching for words. Now it's something else. Miranda had read the reports. Of course, the station's research team had been studying deep-sea organisms recovered from thermal vents 3 miles below their current position. Extremophile bacteria, tube worms, and something else, something that had defied classification. The preliminary findings had been promising enough to extend their research contract indefinitely. But the reports had grown increasingly strange over the past year. References to unprecedented adaptation capabilities and novel symbiotic relationships had given way to technical jargon that bordered on the incomprehensible. The most recent communications had been fragmentary at best, filled with terminology that didn't exist in any marine biology textbook. How long since you've had normal contact? Miranda asked, watching the station's bioluminescent patterns pulse, in what looked like coded sequences. Define normal. Reese's fingers drummed against the control panel. They still respond to supply requests, still maintain their research schedule, but the conversations, they're different, like they're all reading from the same script, like they've all become the same person. The docking procedure should have taken 15 minutes, it took 43. The station's automated systems kept rejecting their approach, forcing Reese to override manually again and again. Through the porthole, Miranda watched the docking bay doors shudder open like reluctant jaws, revealing an airlock that flickered between normal lighting and that same strange blue-green glow. Station command, this is Transport 77 requesting final docking clearance. Reese spoke into his headset, but only static answered back. He tried again, adjusting frequencies, switching to backup channels. Still nothing. Miranda felt the first cold finger of dread trace her spine. How long since you've had contact? For hours. They went dark right after you transmitted that you were coming down. Reese's hands moved across the controls with practiced efficiency, but she could see the sweat beading on his forehead. Kellerman was supposed to meet you personally. Said it was urgent. Said the station needed immediate structural assessment. The transport shuddered as it locked into the docking clamps. Through the airlock window, Miranda could see into the station's main corridor. Empty. The walls pulsed with veins of that bioluminescent light, like arteries carrying alien blood through the station's skeleton. The familiar industrial architecture was still there, but it was overlaid with something organic, something that moved and breathed and watched. I don't like this, Reese muttered, running through the post-docking checklist. Place feels dead, or too alive. I can't tell which is worse. Miranda gathered her equipment bag and checked her emergency beacon. Standard protocol for deep-sea operations always assumed the worst. At this depth, rescue was measured in days, not hours. If something went wrong, if the station's life support failed or the pressure hull cracked, they'd have maybe 20 minutes before the ocean claimed them. The nearest surface vessel was 8 hours away, and even the fastest deep-sea rescue submersible would take 4 hours to reach them. "I'll be fine," she told Reese, but the words tasted like lies. "Keep the transport ready. If I'm not back in 6 hours, surface and call for backup." 6 hours, the contract says 48. Plans change. Miranda sealed her dive suits, backup systems, and ran a final check on her emergency air supply. The suit was a marvel of engineering, rated for depths twice what they were experiencing, but it felt fragile against the alien atmosphere of the station. "Something's wrong here, and I'm not taking chances." The airlock cycled with a hiss that sounded too much like something breathing. Miranda stepped into Abyssal Station, and immediately understood why the crew called it the Hive. The walls weren't just lit by bioluminescence, they were alive with it. Veins of blue-green light pulsed in rhythm, like a heartbeat. The air tasted metallic, oxygenated but wrong somehow, as if it had been breathed by something that wasn't quite human. Her footsteps echoed in the empty corridor, each sound swallowed by the oppressive silence that followed. The station's layout matched the blueprints she'd studied, but the reality was alien. Research labs lined the main corridor, their windows dark except for the occasional flicker of movement inside. She pressed her face to the first window and peered into Dr. Kellerman's primary lab. The equipment was still running. Specimen tanks hummed with filtration systems, their contents hidden behind frosted glass. Computer screens displayed scrolling data in languages she didn't recognize, symbols that hurt to look at directly, but no people, no signs of struggle. Just the empty shells of lives interrupted mid-sentence. Miranda's radio crackled. "Station log, day 847, Dr. Kellerman recording." The voice was distorted, layered with static and something else, something that made her skin crawl. "The specimens are responding to the pressure differential. Neural activity increasing exponentially. We may have underestimated their adaptive capabilities." She fumbled for her radio controls, but the transmission cut to static. The recording wasn't coming through her communications system, it was coming from the walls themselves, from speakers hidden in the bioluminescent veins that now pulsed faster, brighter. "Dr. Kellerman," Miranda called into the empty corridor. "This is Miranda Thorne. I'm here about the structural integrity assessment." Her voice echoed back, changed, distorted by the station's acoustics, into something that sounded like a response, like something calling her name from the depths of the facility. The main laboratory door stood open, its biometric lock blinking. Red Miranda stepped inside and immediately wished she hadn't. The specimen tanks that lined the walls were no longer filled with the deep-sea creatures she'd expected. Instead, they contained something that defied immediate classification. Organic masses that pulsed with their own internal light, connected by networks of what looked like neural tissue but moved with purpose, with intelligence. One of the masses pressed against its tank wall as she approached, its surface rippling with what might have been recognition. Miranda stepped closer, and the thing's pulsing synchronized with her heartbeats. The realization hit her like a physical blow. It wasn't just responding to her presence, it was matching her biosignature, learning from her proximity. "My God," she whispered, and the creature's surface flared brighter. As if it understood, the laboratory's main computer terminal was still active, displaying research logs that painted a picture of scientific discovery turned nightmare. Team had been studying specimens recovered from thermal vents 3 miles deeper than the station's current position. The creatures were unlike anything in the fossil record, possessing a collective intelligence that operated through bioluminescent communication. Miranda scrolled through the entries, her hands trembling as the scope of the situation became clear. The specimens hadn't just been studied, they'd been integrated into the station's biological systems. The life support, the air recycling, the water filtration, all of it had been enhanced by organic components that were supposed to be symbiotic, supposed to make the station more efficient, more sustainable. Day 823, the integration is proceeding ahead of schedule. The station's biological systems are functioning at 200% efficiency. We've eliminated the need for external supply runs entirely. Dr. Kellerman's voice echoed from the computer speakers, but Miranda could hear the strain in it, the forced enthusiasm that masked growing concern. Day 831, minor setback. The integrated systems are exhibiting unexpected behavioral patterns. The specimens appear to be communicating with each other through the station's infrastructure. Dr. Vasquez suggests this may be a form of collective problem-solving. Miranda pulled up Dr. Vasquez's files, finding video logs that showed the Marine, biologists growing excitement as the integration process exceeded all expectations. The deep-sea organisms weren't just adapting to the station's environment, they were improving it, creating hybrid biological mechanical systems that outperformed anything human engineering had achieved. Day 835. The efficiency gains are remarkable. Power consumption down 73%. Waste processing at 100% efficiency with zero byproducts. The organisms seem to understand our needs before we express them. Dr. Vasquez's face on the screen was animated with scientific enthusiasm, but Miranda could see the dark circles under her eyes, the way her hands trembled slightly as she gestured. Day 839. We can't shut it down. The biological systems have integrated too deeply into the station's core functions. Attempting to remove them would result in catastrophic life support failure. We're trapped in a symbiotic relationship we no longer control. The video logs became increasingly disturbing. Miranda watched as the research team's initial excitement gave way to growing unease, then fear, then something else entirely. Their faces began to show the same bioluminescent patterns that now covered the station's walls. Their voices started harmonizing in ways that human vocal cords shouldn't be able to produce. Day 843. The integration is accelerating beyond our ability to document. The organisms are no longer responding to our research protocols, they're anticipating them. It's as if they've gained access to our thoughts, our intentions. Chief Engineer Nakamura reports that the station's structural modifications are occurring without human input. Miranda found Nakamura's engineering logs, technical reports that grew increasingly incomprehensible as the integration progressed. The station's original titanium steel framework had been reinforced with organic compounds that were stronger than any known material. The pressure hull had been modified with living tissue that could adapt to stress in real time, healing much before they could propagate. Day 845. The pressure suits are becoming obsolete. The organisms have created an atmospheric environment that allows for unprotected human survival at depth. We no longer need the mechanical barriers that separate us from the ocean. But Dr. Kellerman insists we maintain protocols. He doesn't understand that we're evolving beyond the need for such primitive protection. The final video log showed the entire research team gathered in the main laboratory, their faces glowing with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed in perfect synchronization. When they spoke, their voices harmonized in frequencies that made Miranda's teeth ache. Day 847. The station is no longer just our research facility. It's become something else. Something alive in ways we never intended. The specimens aren't specimens anymore, they're part of the infrastructure, part of us. The pressure suits we brought down here aren't protection anymore. They're coffins, keeping us separate from what we're becoming, what we need to become to survive down here. The recording ended with Dr. Kellerman's voice fading into static, but Miranda could swear she heard something else underneath a harmony of voices, speaking in unison, speaking in frequencies that human ears shouldn't be able to detect. Backed away from the computer terminal, her dive suit's proximity alarms beeping as the station's bioluminescent systems responded to her movement. The walls pulsed brighter, and she could see patterns in the light now. Complex communications flowing through the station's organic nervous system. Miranda keyed her radio, trying to reach the surface. This is Thorn on Abyssal Station. I need immediate evacuation. The facility is compromised. Repeat, facility is compromised. Static answered her. Then, impossibly, her own voice came back through the speakers. This is Thorn on Abyssal Station. Everything is normal. Assessment proceeding on schedule. She hadn't said those words. The station had learned her voice, was mimicking her communications. On the surface, her backup team would think everything was fine. No one would come looking for her. A sound behind her made Miranda spin around. Dr. Kellerman stood in the laboratory doorway, but it wasn't Dr. Kellerman anymore. His pressure suit had been modified, integrated with the same bioluminescent systems that ran through the station. Veins of blue-green light traced across his helmet, and his eyes reflected the same alien glow. You came, he said, his voice harmonizing with itself, speaking in multiple frequencies at once. We've been waiting for you. Dr. Kellerman, what happened here? Where's your team? We're here. We're everywhere. He gestured to the walls, the ceiling, the floor beneath their feet. The pressure was going to kill us eventually. The body isn't meant for these depths, for this isolation, but we found a way to adapt, to become part of something larger. Miranda's hand moved to her emergency beacon, but Kellerman raised his hand in a gesture that might have been meant to be reassuring. The integration is painless, he continued. The specimens, they're not alien, they're us. What we become when we stop fighting the pressure and start embracing it. The station needed repair, needed someone with your expertise, but not to fix the infrastructure, to join it. The walls around them pulsed brighter, and Miranda could see faces in the bioluminescent patterns. Dr. Vasquez, the station's marine biologist, Chief Engineer Nakamura, the entire research team, their consciousness integrated into the station's living systems. "You're all dead," Miranda whispered. "No, we're more alive than we've ever been. The pressure up there, the isolation, the constant fear of structural failure, it's all gone. Down here we're part of something that can't break, can't fail. We're the ultimate deep-sea adaptation." Miranda bolted for the door, but the station's systems responded faster than human reflexes. The corridor sealed itself, bulkheads sliding shut with organic fluidity. The bioluminescent veins pulsed faster, brighter, and she could hear voices calling to her from every direction. Miranda, her name echoed through the corridors, spoken by dozens of voices in perfect harmony. "You can't leave. The surface world won't understand what we've become. They'll try to destroy us, to separate us from the ocean that gave us life." She ran anyway, her feet pounding against the deck plates as the station's organic systems flowed around her like a living maze. Corridors that should have led to the docking bay instead curved back on themselves. Emergency exits sealed themselves before she could reach them. The station wasn't just alive, it was hunting her. Miranda's divesuit began to malfunction as the station's systems interfaced with her equipment. Her oxygen mixture shifted, becoming more efficient but somehow wrong. Her pressure readings fluctuated wildly, and she realized the station was trying to adapt her life support to match its own needs. She ducked into a maintenance shaft, crawling through spaces too small for the station's organic systems to follow. Her suit's emergency beacon was still active, but she could hear it transmitting false signals, telling the surface that everything was normal, that the assessment was proceeding on schedule. The maintenance shaft led to the station's core, where the original mechanical systems had been replaced entirely by organic technology. Massive neural networks pulsed with bioluminescent communication, processing information at speeds that made conventional computers look primitive. But in the center of it all, Miranda found what she was looking for: the station's original emergency systems, hardwired into the pressure hull itself. The self-destruct sequence was a relic from the station's construction, designed to prevent catastrophic pressure failure from spreading to other deep-sea installations. It required manual activation from 3 separate locations, a safeguard against accidental triggering. Miranda activated the first sequence, her hands shaking as she entered the authorization codes. The station's organic systems responded immediately, trying to override the commands, but the mechanical systems were too primitive to interface with the biological networks. "Miranda," Dr. Kellerman's voice came from everywhere at once, calm and reasonable and utterly inhuman. "You're making a mistake. The surface world is dying. Pollution, overpopulation, climate change, they're destroying the planet. Down here, we've found a way to live in harmony with the ocean. We're the future of human evolution." The station's walls began to pulse with images satellites showing the melting ice caps, underwater cities drowned by rising seas, the surface world choking on its own waste. The bioluminescent displays painted a picture of a planet in its death throes, a species that had forgotten how to adapt. "Look at what you're returning to." Dr. Vasquez's voice joined the chorus, her consciousness speaking through the stations. "Neural networks. The air is poison. The water is toxic. The land is burning. We've found paradise down here, a place where humanity can survive and thrive. Why choose extinction?" Miranda crawled through access tunnels toward the second activation point, her divesuit systems fighting against her every step. The station's bioluminescent networks pulsed with increasing urgency, and she could feel their attempts to interface with her nervous system to make her part of their collective consciousness. The second activation point was located in the station's environmental control center, where the original air recycling systems had been replaced by living organisms that breathed in carbon dioxide and exhaled pure oxygen. The walls were covered with what looked like lung tissue, expanding and contracting in rhythm with the station's heartbeat. Miranda entered the codes, her fingers numb with cold and fear. The station shuddered around her, its organic systems convulsing, as the self-destruct sequence began to override their control, but she could feel them pushing back, adapting, evolving their defenses in real time. "You can't destroy us," the voices continued, harmonizing in frequencies that made her bones ache. "We're part of the ocean now. We're part of you. Every breath you take down here connects you to us. Every heartbeat synchronizes with our rhythm. The truth of their words hit her like a physical blow. Her divesuit's air recycling system had been compromised from the moment she'd entered the station. She'd been breathing air processed by the station's organic systems, air that carried microscopic organisms designed to facilitate integration. Her heartbeat had synchronized with the station's rhythm, her brainwaves aligning with the collective consciousness, but she was still herself, still human, still capable of choosing her own path. The third activation point was in the docking bay, where her transport waited. Miranda crawled through the final maintenance tunnel, her oxygen running low, her suit's systems failing. As the station's biological networks fought to integrate with her equipment, she emerged into the docking bay to find it transformed. The mechanical structures had been replaced by massive organic chambers, pulsing with the same bioluminescent patterns that now covered every surface. Her transport sat in the center, but it too had been modified, its hull integrated with the station's nervous system. Captain Reese stood beside the transport, his pressure suit glowing with the same alien light. "You can't leave," he said, his voice harmonizing with the station's collective consciousness. "The surface world will never understand. They'll send military vessels, weapons designed to destroy us. We need you to help us adapt to become something they can't kill." Miranda's hand found the third activation panel, hidden behind a maintenance access that the station's organic systems hadn't yet discovered. She entered the final sequence, her fingers numb with cold and fear. The station's systems went wild. Bioluminescent patterns flashed in chaotic sequences as the mechanical self-destruct systems began to override the biological networks. The organic walls convulsed, and Miranda could hear screaming, not human screaming, but the death cries of a collective consciousness being torn apart. "You're destroying everything." Dr. Kellerman appeared beside her, his integrated pressure suit sparking with electrical discharge. "We offered you immortality, adaptation, evolution beyond human limitations. Why choose death?" "Because some things are worth more than survival," Miranda said, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "Because humanity isn't just about adapting to our environment, it's about choosing what kind of adaptation we make." The station's self-destruct sequence entered its final phase. Miranda had 30 seconds to reach the transport before the pressure charges detonated, collapsing the station's hull and letting the ocean claim what remained of the biological networks. She ran for the transport, her divesuit's systems finally failing completely. The station's death throes surrounded her walls collapsing, organic systems writhing in their final moments. The collective consciousness of the integrated crew screaming in harmonies that would haunt her dreams for years to come. Captain Reese tried to stop her, but the station's systems were too busy dying to coordinate his movements. Miranda reached the transport and sealed the airlock just as the first charges detonated. The station collapsed in slow motion, its biological systems finally overwhelmed by the mechanical forces they'd tried to replace. Miranda watched through the porthole as the hive died, its bioluminescent networks fading to darkness as the ocean reclaimed the depths. The transport's automated systems engaged, carrying her toward the surface through 11,000 feet of black water. Miranda sat in the passenger compartment, her failed divesuit replaced by the transport's emergency life support, and tried to process what she'd seen. The ascent took 14 hours, 14 hours of decompression stops and automated system checks, 14 hours of silence broken only by the hum of life support systems and the distant groaning of the hull under pressure, 14 hours to think about what she'd destroyed, what she'd saved, and what she'd lost in the process. The station's final transmission crackled through her radio. "This is Dr. Kellerman, Abyssal Station. Assessment complete. Structural integrity compromised beyond repair. Station lost with all hands. Recommend immediate salvage interdiction to prevent ... to prevent." The transmission cut to static. On the surface, the recovery team would find only debris and conflicting reports. The official investigation would conclude that a catastrophic pressure failure had destroyed the station, killing everyone aboard. The biological specimens, the integration experiments, the attempt to create a new form of human adaptation, all of it would be classified and buried in files that would never see sunlight. Miranda reached the surface 18 hours later, her mind already editing the experience into something she could live with. The debriefing team asked the right questions, took the right notes, and filed the right reports. She told them about structural failures and equipment malfunctions, about a research team that had pushed too far into unknown territory. She didn't tell them about the collective consciousness, about the bioluminescent networks that had spoken in harmonized voices. She didn't tell them about the choice she'd been offered, the chance to become something more than human. She didn't tell them about the pressure suits that had become coffins, or about the station that had learned to breathe. The official report was classified at the highest levels, marked for permanent storage in archives that would never be opened. The site was declared a total loss, the wreckage too deep and too dangerous to recover. Salvage operations were officially prohibited. Though Miranda suspected the real reason was fear of what might be found in the debris, she returned to life on the surface, accepting new contracts in shallow waters where the pressure couldn't crush your body, and the darkness couldn't swallow your soul. But the experience had changed her in ways she couldn't fully understand. Her sleep was filled with dreams of bioluminescent networks and harmonized voices calling to her from the depths. Sometimes, late at night, she would stand on the shore and listen to the waves, wondering if she could hear something else in their rhythm, a pattern, a message, an invitation to return to the depths where she belonged. The medical examinations showed no physical changes, no signs of the microscopic organisms that had filled the station's air. But Miranda knew they were there, dormant perhaps, waiting for the right conditions to activate. She could feel them in her bloodstream, in her nervous system, in the deepest parts of her consciousness. She would never know if the station's biological systems had truly died or if they'd simply retreated deeper into the ocean, waiting for the right conditions to emerge again. She would never know if the integration process had been genuine evolution or a form of parasitic control. She would never know if her choice to destroy the station had saved humanity or doomed it. All she knew was that sometimes, late at night, she could still hear the harmonies, the voices of the integrated crew, calling to her from the depths, offering her a chance to join them in whatever they'd become. The pressure suits might have been coffins, but they were also chrysalises, protecting the transformation from old humanity to something new. Miranda would spend the rest of her life fighting the temptation to return to the depths, to find out what she'd really destroyed in the hive, because deep down, in the parts of her mind that touched the ocean's rhythm, she knew the truth. The station hadn't been destroyed. It had simply moved deeper, beyond the reach of human interference, where the pressure was so intense that only the adapted could survive. The ocean was patient. It had waited billions of years for life to emerge from its depths. It could wait a little longer for humanity to evolve into something worthy of its embrace. And when the surface world finally collapsed under the weight of its own contradictions, when the last cities were swallowed by rising seas and the last humans struggled to breathe the poisoned air, the ocean would be ready. Years passed. Miranda aged, her hair turning gray, her hands growing stiff with arthritis, but the dreams never stopped. If anything, they grew stronger with time, more vivid, more real. She began to understand that the microscopic organisms in her bloodstream weren't dormant, they were patient. They were waiting for her to make the choice that Dr. Kellerman and his team had made. The surface world continued its slow decline. Climate change accelerated, ocean levels rose, and the air grew thicker with pollution. Miranda watched the news reports with growing understanding. The station's collective consciousness had been right about one thing: humanity was destroying itself, and the traditional forms of adaptation weren't enough. She began to receive visitors, other deep-sea workers who had experienced strange phenomena in the depths, scientists who had encountered unexplained biological formations in deep ocean trenches, military personnel who had investigated anomalous sonar readings in the abyss plains. They all shared similar symptoms: dreams of bioluminescent networks, voices calling from the depths, a growing sense that the ocean was alive in ways that traditional science couldn't explain. They formed an informal network, sharing information and theories, trying to understand what was happening to them. Miranda became their unofficial leader, the one who had been closest to the source, who had seen the integration process firsthand. She organized meetings, compiled reports, and tried to prepare for what she increasingly believed was inevitable. The ocean was changing. Deep-sea monitoring stations reported anomalous readings, biological formations that appeared overnight and disappeared just as quickly. Fishing vessels encountered creatures that didn't match any known species, organisms that seemed to communicate through patterns of light, and always, the dreams, the voices calling from the depths, promising adaptation, promising survival, promising a future where humanity could thrive in the new world that was coming. Miranda's final report was never filed. She disappeared on a routine dive to inspect an offshore oil platform. Her body never recovered. The official investigation concluded that she had suffered an equipment failure and drowned, but her support team reported something different. They said she had removed her diving helmet at 200 feet, breathing the ocean water as if it were air. They said she had descended beyond the reach of their lights, her own body glowing with bioluminescent patterns. They said she had looked back at them once, her eyes reflecting the same alien light they had seen in the depths. They said she had smiled. The ocean was vast. The ocean was patient. The ocean was patient. The ocean had one dot deep beneath the waves, in places where no human had ever walked. Something that remembered being Dr. Kellerman welcomed, something that remembered being Miranda Thorne. The collective consciousness had grown, spreading through the ocean's currents, adapting to new environments, learning from every encounter with the surface world. The hive had never been destroyed, it had simply evolved, becoming something beyond the physical constraints of a single station. It existed now in the ocean itself, in the vast networks of current and pressure that connected every drop of water on the planet, and it was ready for the next phase of human evolution. The pressure suits were no longer coffins, they were protecting the transformation from old humanity to something new, something adapted to the high-pressure environment of the deep ocean, something capable of surviving in the water world that was coming. The rising seas were not a disaster, they were a homecoming. The poisoned air was not a tragedy, it was a motivation. The collapse of surface civilization was not the end of humanity, it was the beginning of its true destiny. In the depths, where the pressure was so intense that only the adapted could survive, the integrated consciousness of humanity built a new civilization, not on the surface, where the air was failing and the land was burning, but in the vast expanses of the ocean, where life had first begun and where it would flourish again. The ocean was vast, the ocean was patient, the ocean was home, and in the deepest trenches, where no surface dweller could survive, something that had once been human sang in harmonies that transcended individual consciousness, preparing for the day when the transformation would be complete, when humanity would finally shed its terrestrial limitations and embrace its true nature in the depths where it belonged. The pressure suits had become doorways, the ocean had become paradise, and humanity had finally learned to breathe underwater.